Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Last Guardian video walkthrough. So, now that we've come out of that sequence, we can now climb onto Trico's tail, and we can come down into this aqueduct, and we're going to be introduced to some of the combat in The Last Guardian, which I've already mentioned that the combat is kind of awful, and arguably the worst part of the game. But you're going to see a little glimpse of what it is, and some of the earlier parts of these combative situations can be done stealthily, and I kind of liked that. There's a moment coming up where you need to pull a chain to let Trico come into an area, and then you can run away while being chased by those machines, drop down onto a lower platform, go through a tunnel, backtrack on yourself and climb up, and all the soldiers that were chasing you will then be looking over the edge where you dropped, and you can just get around all of them by doing some interesting baiting and switching with stealth mechanics. And I think that should have been the entirety of how the combat played out in this game. I can appreciate when, you know, Trico turns up and starts beating people up, that can also be a thing as well. I just don't think they should have ever emphasised it as much as they do in this game. There is a chapter at the very end where you will be fighting wave after wave of people, and it's just not fun. It's not fun to be a part of. It's an interesting power fantasy for Trico, but we don't control Trico, so it's nothing to do with us, and it just ultimately feels like a waste of time. And that's not mentioning the people with the shields. There is an enemy type in this game that holds up these eye symbols, and they completely freeze the beast's ability to do anything. He just kind of cowers. So you have to run up to these people and push them and make them drop the shield, and then if you command Trico to swing, he'll usually break the enemy and break the shield, and you can use that quite effectively. But if you, for whatever reason, do a bad running attack on them, or do a bad roll into them, you'll just bounce off them instead of making them drop the shield. And then when you bounce off them, you're on the ground in a lot of animations, and then the enemies come and pick you up, and then to get out of the grab you have to mash the buttons, and it's not a very satisfying mashing sequence. It's a sequence where you mash for ages and it doesn't really do much. It's kind of awkward and ungainly and just not very fun, and this is what it looks like. So when they pick you up like this, you want to mash the buttons. Originally I was mashing the face buttons and both the triggers, but it didn't make a difference, so nowadays I just mash the face buttons and try to get away from these people. One of the good ways to get around them if you're having difficulties is to roll by pressing square, but you need to be aware that there's recovery on the roll and it stops you dead. So after the roll, if there's another one next to you, he can come and grab you, and their grab detection is way better than the boys. So, you know, if we could only play as them, we would never jump towards a ledge and not grab it, but that's just not the game this is. But now we're back here, we can use Trico's ability to destroy these people, and for the most, it will do what needs to be done. It will kill them, it will rattle them about, it will do all kinds of good stuff. But you can command it to be a little bit more aggressive, because it has a nature of doing what a lot of animals do, where they kind of jump up and down excitedly. You know, like when a dog gets a ball and it wants you to take it off it, and it's jumping and it's all excitable. Well, he does that too, and if you do the command button and square, you can tell it to swing, to push, to do the attack, and I found moments where when I was commanding Trico, he would do it a lot better than almost any of the other commands. And then after battle, Trico gets quite excited, so this is the game showing you that if you want him to come back to his senses, you have to pet him. Which leads us to the petting mechanic, which is something you can spend a lot of your time doing, but it's arguably pointless and not necessary, but it's a really nice touch, and it really helps build the relationship between you and the beast. Because on my first playthrough, when you pet Trico, it gets rid of the blood on him, so you can heal all of his wounds. You pull the spears out, you pet the marks where they were, and it dries up the blood. You make him look nice and presentable, and you take care of his look. And that's what you'll spend a lot of your first playthrough doing, because you're under this illusion that it helps the game in some way. And for this walkthrough, sorry, I intentionally neglected treating Trico like I did on my first run. That's me trimming out a bunch of menus. I was having problems with my microphone hooking up, and it kept coming up on an alert, and I didn't want it in the footage, so I've trimmed it out. But all I did, guys, is walk towards Trico. It's just a transition. And now we're going to be doing some platforming with the questionable frame rate of The Last Guardian, which is always fun. But the petting mechanic, for the walkthrough, I don't pull hardly any spears out of Trico, and I don't pet him at all. I just kind of let him do his thing, because I wanted to test to see if the experience would be different. And I can confirm now, guys, having played the game twice now, that it didn't make any difference. The only difference was, like, emotional difference for me, because I didn't want to see the animal with all the blood on it. I didn't want to see it injured and in pain. But I didn't see a gameplay result of those two different playstyles. I didn't see Trico being more cooperative. I didn't see him wasting more of my time. It was generally the same result. So as much as I would tell you to take care of your friend, you don't have to. It doesn't seem like. There might be moments where the game tells you to do it, and that's probably something you want to do, because that might be scripted. But once again, the scripting in this game is so incredibly vague, I couldn't honestly tell you what is expected of you at every situation, because it's not always apparent. There are a few triggers later on where the game just has to trigger things, and I couldn't find a cohesive way of triggering them. It was just a case of waiting, and it's really frustrating, those moments, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Like, there's a bit where you're walking around on top of a tower and you have to trigger a cutscene, and the cutscene just kind of triggers itself after a while. It really is one of the least interesting games I could imagine speedrunning, because of just how much the game doesn't do what you ask of it. And somebody left a comment mentioning on the previous video that when you give Trico more than one command, it can confuse the AI. But once again, folks, I've not really seen much evidence of that either, because if you don't command Trico, he just kind of stands. But if you shout at him until he faces where you want him to face, you can see his body language change, and you can see when he's going to do things. Like when you tell him to jump, and he looks to the left and to the right, he's not going to jump. You need him to get his head into position and see those subtle changes in his body where he's going to get his wings ready, and then he jumps. If you command him and you don't see him get into that position, like, I can't see a world where commanding him more wouldn't be the only thing that you should do there, because then you're at the mercy of waiting for him to do things. And he can be great, don't get me wrong. There are times when Trico will climb everything perfectly. There's a tower sequence just before the end of the game where you're shooting mirrors and stretching bridges. That is the only part of this game where Trico did everything I needed without me needing to command him. He just was off, and I didn't have to do anything, and it felt wonderful. Because I would say jump, and he'd do all of the jumps. I didn't have to command any others. He didn't stop, he didn't dilly-dally. He took a shit on the bridge, and I got a trophy, which was weird. But he did mostly what I wanted him to do, and it was at that moment where you feel that if there was more rigidity to his pathing, that this would be a better game, because there would be less frustration. But I can almost guarantee that it would be a less charming game, because there wouldn't be moments like this, where he just walks around like a twat, looking up, giving you the illusion that the path is over there, and it's not. But a lot of these moments are him actually making these animal noises at another Guardian, because there will be several instances where you see something in the sky and you can see it, which I think is great game design. There's one moment where it's sat on top of the tallest bridge and it's just like a little silhouette, but you can tell that that's the Guardian you will meet later on, and I love that kind of foreshadowing. It's really, really clever, I think. But all you want to do here is get up onto that thing that he's jumped up on without me, and now we need him to come down. So I'm going to give him a quick shout, and he's going to be dropping down and doing whatever it is that he does. Come on, dude, you can do this. Here he comes. But do you see the body language change? That's what you're looking for when you play this game. You want to see how Trico's body language changes, because it's the key of exactly what he's going to do, and it's the most useful tool in the game. And look at that. I didn't tell it to jump, it's just doing it now. That's perfect. Look at it. This is Last Guardian what it could have been, when Trico does what he's expected to do. But it brings an interesting question, doesn't it? Are we even playing the game if Trico does what he's supposed to do all the time? Because then all you're doing is getting back in your Final Fantasy 15 car and letting it drive you to a destination. You know, it's that weird argument of, if he did work better, there would be less for the player to do, and it would make it altogether potentially less interesting. So there's this weird compromise, I think, and that's why I think that we're going to be talking about The Last Guardian for a long time, and not necessarily because of its weaknesses or because of its greatness, but just because of how very specific a thing it is in a time where games just aren't like this. They're not like this anymore, they really aren't. You know, tell me a game that's even remotely close to this recently. You can't, because the only stuff you can really compare this is to the previous works of this team. But then even then, this is not really like Shadow of the Colossus, because Shadow of the Colossus is pretty much in your hands the entire time. If you know where the Colossus are, you don't even need to shine your sword. You know, you can just go to them, and you can get it done. If you know how to kill them, you can kill them very quickly. And a lot of those mechanics, I dare say, feel better than they did in this, because I did a balls deep of Shadow of the Colossus, and climbing the Colossi feels better than climbing Trico. Jumping feels better. Just the movement of the character, Wanda, feels better. Everything about that game feels better, even though it's a lot older than this one. It's like 10 years, isn't it? But that leads us into what I said in the previous video. I think the reason we feel the way we do in this game is intentional. Because they want you to feel vulnerable. They want you to feel like you need this animal to survive, and you do. But to a player like myself, that just annoys me. As I try and get Trico to come this way. We did that puzzle to stop him being mesmerised by the scent, if you're wondering. All I want is for him to come over here so that we can do some platforming, and he will do it. He'll just do it in his time, so enjoy that. But because there's not too much to talk about, I will be chirping up every so often when I see something that's worth your time. But for the most, I'm going to talk about some different subjects. Some people like this, some people hate this. If you're here for Last Guardian and you're a massive Last Guardian fan, this is not the walkthrough for you, because you're probably already better than I was at the game when I recorded this, because you've put more time into it, because you like the game a lot more than I did. And that's if you even need a walkthrough at all, because let's face it guys, it's not the most taxing video game. The most taxing thing about this is keeping you cool when the AI doesn't work. And saying it doesn't work is probably wrong, because the AI does work, it's just been programmed to be annoying. And it's that weird thing, isn't it, where, do you think people are going to start pointing to this game and saying that, like, there's nothing wrong with the AI, it's meant to be bad? That would be a really sad day if that becomes the counter-argument for Trico. Even though I don't think the AI is bad, I just think it's temperamental. Which, once again, oh, but that's by design, you know, that to me just feels... It's like those people that say the shitty frame rate is cinematic. You know, the shitty frame rate is intentional because now it feels like a movie. Like, no, the shitty frame rate's intentional because they couldn't figure out how to not have a shitty frame rate. If you were to ask anybody who knows anything about the importance of refresh rates and frame rates, they will tell you the higher, the better. So that just doesn't work. The reason it works for television is because you don't move the camera. Camera is always going to be affixed in that position that they put it in, regardless of whether it's tracking, if it's panning, or what it's doing. It will always do the same thing. It's not going to move around erratically, because you're not controlling it. It's not a video game. You know, that's the big difference. It works great for cinema, doesn't work great for games. And that's the distinction here, guys. That's an interesting one. I tried to jump just then, or roll, to try and do this a bit quicker, to see if I can animation cancel, and he hit the wall and rolled backwards. So be very careful. The game will fuck with you. Trust me guys, it's very scary. And I did this my first playthrough on Trico's back, so I'd never seen this part of the game before. And I was like, where the hell am I right now? Because I'd never done it that way, which is another feather in the cap of this video game, along with shitty frame rate, is that there are these moments where stuff just works differently, and I don't remember seeing it from this perspective, and I think that that's definitely a great part of the game. I can't critique that at all. I think that's wonderful. That you can have these, I hate to say emergent gameplay moments, but that's what it feels like. And it's not like Mafia 3, where randomly 2 trucks pull up and start gunning you down. It's actually fun, and I enjoy that. As I push over here. The general puzzle of this area is to get Trico to jump on top of this structure I'm on, and then you can climb Trico's tail. But once again, folks, commanding him and ordering him to do what you like is not always the most obvious or simple task. So I trust you'll be able to get it done as I make a mess of the platforming here. But I watched The Accountant last night, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it. It's probably going to be a little bit spoilery, guys, so if you're interested in the film, don't listen to this next few moments. But if you've no idea what this movie is, it is a film that stars Ben Affleck, and he plays this gentleman who has autism. He's on the autistic spectrum, and it has enabled him to... He's high-functioning, but he's got a gift for maths, for mathematics, and for having a very, shall we say, logical type of brain for approaching problem-solving. And he's a savant when it comes to numbers. And this film is about this accountant who essentially takes on these jobs with some undesirable people, but just so happens to be a total military-trained badass because he had quite an abusive father who took him to Indonesia and learnt him that Silat martial arts from the Raid movies, and he's shooting 50 cals at over a mile distance and all this other stuff, yet he's this unassuming accountant. And he does the general, you know, accountant thing for John Lithgow's character and his company. He bumps into Anna Kendrick, who's going to be the love interest in the film, even though, of course, he's having difficulty with that. Oh, by the way, guys, I think the reason why Trico's being uncooperative here is because it wants you to see the other Guardian up there. Did you see it? That's one of those foreshadowing moments. It's a cool moment, but I would really like you to move over here, dude. That would be great. That'd just be great if you'd come over here, buddy. Just this way. But he's got his like violent eyes on, which tells you that this is meant to probably happen. So he's doing these numbers, he finds a problem with it, and then the person who's responsible for it gets assassinated by a fixer, a cleaner. And there's the contract put out on the accountant and on the Anna Kendrick's character as well. And because good old Ben Affleck is a nice guy, and in spite of his, you know, his social problems when it comes to interacting with people thanks to his autism, he wants to protect Anna Kendrick's character because he likes her. But he can't, you know, tell her he likes her because he's having trouble with the whole social interaction thing. Cue intrigue and thrillery, espionage-y stuff with some action here and there, and a generally overall interesting story of people who are told, you know, way back when that they were just special or stupid or idiots because we didn't quite understand what autism was, and perhaps we were looking at it wrong. Instead of calling them different in a bad way, maybe they're better, or maybe they're different in good ways. And it's kind of this nice theme. There's like a moral of the film that just because you're different doesn't necessarily mean you're bad. And, you know, it's definitely not going to be out there preaching this because there's a lot of people shooting, and it's not exactly saying that shooting people's bad. You know, it's just he kills everything. It's that thing when it comes to these kind of action movies. But the main story of it, I really enjoyed. I thought it was a fun romp with some good action, and I thought Ben Affleck was really good in it. And it went a few places I didn't expect it to go, but I saw the twist coming really soon because there's a sequence where Ben Affleck's character goes to a funeral with his father. And it all kicks off, and it gives you an idea of the story of why it happened, like the way it did. But there's two children. One of them is Ben Affleck, the other one is his younger brother, but the younger brother isn't at the funeral because the film doesn't want you to see him as an adult. And the reason they don't want you to see him as an adult is because it's tied to the twist. And I got it immediately. As soon as I saw the funeral part, I'm like, oh, so that's the brother then. Okay, now it makes sense. Because there was a part of the story where I'm watching it, I'm like, where does this guy fit in? I really like the actor. I really like, you know, the fact that it's got this kind of irreverent fixer on the other side to be this faux antagonist. And then in the end, all the tension is completely stripped from the film because you've figured it out. And it's not the film's fault, even though it's a little bit, you know, it tries, it's not too overt. I got the twist, and it kind of ruined it for me. So the last 15 minutes of the movie, I already knew where it was going, and all the tension was lost, which is unfortunate. But it's, you know, it's not really the movie's fault. I've watched a lot of movies, I guess. Oh, by the way, folks, this is another one of those combat sequences. I'm calling Trico right now because when he drops down, he's going to unleash the wrath. But until that point, I can't do much. And you'll notice the ones with the weapons will ignore you, but if they drop the weapons, they will come and try and, like, fondle you, so make sure you don't let that happen. So there was that twist that I kind of saw coming that I didn't appreciate. And then there was the whole funeral scene. It didn't make sense to me. The father of Ben Affleck's character is this super borderline psychopathic general. He's in charge of psychological warfare at the military. And this is a dude who's having, like, his 8-year-old kids getting beaten up by professional fighters so that he can train them to fight back. And the professional fighter who's training them is like, they've had enough for the day, we're good here. You know, you did good, guys. And then the dad's like, no, they hadn't done enough. I'm their father, I know where their limits are, fight. And he forces them to fight, and he puts them in some really bad situations. And if you look at it, dude is fucking abusive. It's a straight up abusive, controlling relationship, and it's pretty bad. So these kids are just completely controlled by their father, who is this military life, you know, special ops psychopath, and he's instilling a lot of that in them, regardless of if they want it or not, and probably really skewing their moral values in a lot of ways. And then they go to this funeral. And a fight breaks out because Ben Affleck's character doesn't really know how to interact, and he's obviously mourning, and he ends up fighting these people who are trying to remove him and his dad from this funeral because they don't belong there. So Ben Affleck, it kind of skims over this quite quickly as well. Ben Affleck beats up these dudes. There's 2 police officers at this place that, for whatever reason, at a fucking funeral, pull a gun. I know it's in America, but is America really that crazy? They pull a gun on people in military outfits, and the dad steps in front, and for whatever reason, ends up getting shot in this little altercation at a funeral. And don't get me wrong, folks. There might be some part of it that I didn't quite get, because I was playing Mafia 3 while watching it, because I had to finish off a bunch of boring shit in that game, so I literally spent the entire time craning over looking at it, because it was a really good film and I enjoyed it a lot. But I might have not caught some subtle moment of it, even though I was really watching. I was barely looking at the game, because you can autopilot that game like a bitch. And I might have seen some subtle part of it, but it just seemed to me like a fight broke out at a funeral, and some trigger-happy cops ended up shooting his dad. And his dad is this super badass general who's in charge of psychological special ops, and he just gets shot by some random fucking hillbilly cop. It was the weirdest way of making all the threads tie together, and I didn't appreciate it at all. And I'm going to watch it again because it's a really fun film. I enjoyed it a lot. But that to me felt like the weakest aspect of the movie, because everything else had got something behind it. There's a couple of interesting twists that I really appreciated, like the one who was his handler never even saw that, never even thought about his handler at all. They did that beautifully. She's interacting with him, she's giving him information, she's trying to keep him on the path, on the right track of just being this accountant, and then at the end it's like, this is who it was, and you're just like, motherfucker, that is great, never saw it. What a wonderful way of doing that. But unfortunately saw the brother twist. But yeah, for whatever reason, the whole funeral section just did nothing for me. And I died watching it too. I died in Mafia 3 because I was too busy watching the movie that I didn't realise somebody flanked me with a shotgun. Because I was doing that mission, you know, where you throw the lawyer guy out the window. I was doing that mission, and you have to infiltrate that courthouse. I think he's a judge or something. I wasn't paying attention. That game is really boring, but I want to beat it, so that's why I was doing it. But yeah, if you're excited about it, and hearing what I just said didn't ruin it too much for you, interesting film. There's some interesting stuff in it. There's this scene where I don't know what he's doing. I honestly don't. I don't know if it's some kind of Muay Thai thing, but he's using this baseball bat on his shin, up against his shin bone. He's like rolling it up and down, and he puts the music on, and he starts hitting his shin. And I'm almost certain I've heard like Bas Rutten mention, you know, trying to condition your shin bone to be able to take bigger impacts by hitting it. But I don't know if it was one of his ways of dealing with something because he was autistic, or one of the habits that he had, like the Solomon Grundy rhyme, or if he was just being nuts. I didn't quite catch that, but he does this, he keeps doing it on his shin. And I had no idea why. Maybe it's to help his kicks. I'm hoping it is, but it was just this wonderful, weird moment of this character has these weird features to him, and this was one of them, and I appreciated that because I like a character doing weird shit. I was a big fan of good old William Sadler being naked doing his kung fu in Die Hard 2. Did he have to be naked? No. He's in the middle of Christmas. It was snowy. It was freezing. But he's naked anyway. He's a beast. But this is Last Guardian, and we're now climbing up a ladder while being attacked by more of the rapey robots. And the music's kicking up, which is one of my favourite parts of the game. The music on this game is wonderful. Sounds like Trico's kicking ass as well. Trico's getting in there as we push forward, and we beckon to our partner to follow us. And then I watched The Magnificent Seven. So, here's a confession to make, which no avid film fan would say. I have never seen either versions of The Magnificent Seven. I've never seen Seven Samurais. I've seen the anime for it, which is kind of shameful, but I have never seen the original Akira Kurosawa, like, 3-hour epic thing. I'm going to watch it. I've got it now. I'm going to watch it because I'm dead stoked. And I've never seen the one with Yul Brynner, Charles Bronson, and all those dudes. Like Steve McQueen and everybody. I've never seen that one, and I hear that that one is really good as well. So I've only seen the Anton Fuqua one, and it's okay. It's not a bad movie by any standards, but it just feels a bit like there are 7 people to introduce in that film. Each of these 7 people have an important role of protecting this village, and I just don't think they give any of them enough time before they start killing them off, because that's inevitably how this thing goes. Village is being, you know, completely terrorized by a tyrant. He does some mean act in that film. It just so happened to be killing someone's husband and burning a church. killing a bunch of people, actually, because he's just not a very nice person. Guy who acts as him, really good actor, thought he played the part really well. Lots of twitches and tweaks in his face to make him look all unhinged and what have you. Good performance. Hammy, liked it. And then you have the girl going into the local town to try and, recruit some guns. Some hired guns, some cutthroats. And she bumps into Denzel Washington, who, of course, never ages because he's a majestic human being and I love him. So, in the middle of the Wild West, which I'm pretty sure carried on the tradition of the good old American trend of racism, we have this black dude who is somehow, not being treated like a slave or being treated really badly, who's got his horse and he's like a sheriff in all these other places in, Arkansas and stuff. And he's a badass, because he's Denzel Washington. And she ends up bumping into him and Chris Pratt's character because they're in a bar when something kicks off and he does the whole, shooting people really fast thing with the revolvers, which everybody loves because it's cool Western shit. And they end up signing up to this interesting gambit of, here's this job, probably not going to end well, are you up for it? And when I see movies like this, I always think the same thing when it comes to the characters. The characters are usually lost, aren't they? They're usually some kind of fallen men. And this is that one opportunity to redeem themselves. It's the one opportunity to die with meaning, to die for a reason. And it always gives you that impression, doesn't it? But when you cast Chris Pratt and Denzel Washington and stuff, these people can't die. Oh, that's what I felt anyway, even though I knew they were going to in some fashion. So it's all doing what it's doing, and the setting up the camp, the setting up all the traps and training the people, and they come and there's this massive kicking off, and for the most, it's kind of a brainless action movie with Western tropes in it, and just the trimmings of a Western, and I like Westerns, I've got a soft spot for them, but I don't think anybody's going to look back at this with the same kind of reverence that they do to the originals, like the Yul Brynner one, like the Seven Samurai, because it just... I don't think they built the characters well enough in time for us to care about what happened to them. And a lot of the stuff that happened to them seemed a bit rushed to me. Like the way that, once again guys, spoiler alert, even though you kind of know it's coming, Chris Pratt's character kind of doesn't have a good reason to even be there. He's there to get his horse back and maybe redeem himself for some unvoiced reason, which I couldn't quite understand as Trico's getting all caught up fighting this one dude and not indeed fighting him, which is fun. Always good when he's doing whatever he's doing right now. Get him, dude, get him! There you go. I love it as well when Trico knocks you over when he's trying to knock them over, and you stay down longer than they do half the time because of the animations. It's crazy. But Chris Pratt ends up essentially getting shot, and getting shot's a big deal back in those days, one would think, because the medicine just wasn't as good. The awareness of disease and things just wasn't as good. It was cutting edge and as good as it could be, but we didn't quite understand it the same way, so one would think infection and all that bad stuff is probably a death sentence getting shot in the Old West. And he takes it well because he's a Hollywood guy, and the next scene you see him, he's running, shooting 2 guns and having absolutely no problems breathing because it's a film. And then he does this ridiculous thing where he rides this horse through a Gatling gun army just so he can detonate a piece of dynamite, which was foreshadowed by him saying, I really wanted to blow something up. And the moment they didn't just execute him then and there, that's how you kind of knew there was going to be that kind of finale, as it so happened. But I was kind of on board with the entire movie, just enjoying it as kind of a popcorn western with a lot of people in it, up to the point where the Gatling gun came out. So Gatling guns are crazy, right? They can shoot like 400 bullets per minute or something ridiculous. This dude is on a hill with a Gatling gun. He's shooting this Gatling gun, which, how many rounds do you think it had? 100 rounds, 200 rounds, something like that. And he's spinning this gun left and right, like completely spinning it, like I do on high sensitivity until I'm used to what I'm doing. And then it cuts to what they're shooting at, and they're hitting a million holes on every conceivable part of the world. Like, every single part of this town has been riddled with fucking bullets. Completely riddled with bullets. And he's spinning this thing and shooting. And I'm not one for realism in movies. I'm okay when it comes to suspension of, of disbelief and everything, but, like, it didn't correlate with what you were seeing. And it kind of really threw me out of the movie completely, because A, all the important people aren't going to die. 2 of the cool people died almost instantly, getting perfectly aimed at, even though he didn't even tilt the fucking gun. Like, The dude is sniping with a machine gun from a mile away when all he's doing is Arnold Schwarzenegger hip-firing the piece of shit, and it would have never done that kind of tight spray. I don't care how many rounds it puts down range. So that entire sequence just seemed like an excuse to shoot the town up and have a bunch of people die really quickly so they could get to the conclusion. And I felt like it didn't reflect what they'd done up to that point. It didn't have any kind of immediacy to it or creativity to it. It was just like, Gatling gun, shoot everybody, you know. And it did nothing for me, that. But that movie, I think the biggest problem it's going to have is that it's called Magnificent Seven, and a lot of people love that legacy. So they might watch it and just be thinking, like, what the fuck were they doing? This is like MTV does, you know, Magnificent Seven. But I had fun, and that's what matters. But thank you for watching, guys. Hopefully the video did something for you, even if it was just interesting movie talk. But as always, you take care now.